first in the story of Nigora, who is from Tajikistan, is a woman who had a man who left her. And the second type of woman without a man that we saw tonight are young women who are trying to circumvent the whole process of even having to have a man in their life. And I want to tell you a little bit about more of the context of both of these women, where they're coming from, and why they would be trying to do what they're doing without men. In the societies that we learned about in Tajikistan and Bangladesh, men equal security, community approval, and in the best case, a happy partnership and family, and in the worst case scenario, a life of servitude, abuse, and unhappiness. And the assumption always is that women will follow suit, that no matter what happens to them, if the man leaves them, if he's tragically killed for some reason, or does decide to have an affair, or sexually abuses someone, that women will just keep going, that they will continue to hold up society's image of what women are supposed to be, who they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to do. And men, unfortunately, seem to get away with most of this again and again. And this is not to rank on men at all, it's just to become aware of what's going on in these societies, and also our society as well. So these are places that are very far away from us, but I imagine everyone in this audience can relate on some level, whether it's personally, friends, family, news, whatever. These issues that face women are global as well as local. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Nigora and what she's facing in Tajikistan. And usually I don't like to read, but there was so much important information that I'm going to go back and forth for my notes so that I don't miss anything, leaving anything out. So according to an article published by Al Jazeera in 2013, every year 1 million men are leaving Tajikistan in search of work, and as mentioned in the film, they mostly head to Russia. Many of these men do return home, they leave for seasonal work, but a study conducted in 2010 by the International Organization for Migration found that around 30 of these migrant men eventually do settle down abroad, either having remarried or just not opting to return home. In Tajikistan, making the situation more difficult for women, it's one of the Muslim-majority countries in the world where men can divorce women by the practice of repeating talaq, which means divorce, 3 times, and then the divorce is legal. Customarily, talaq is declared in front of witnesses, an imam or other men in the community, but it doesn't have to be. It can be carried out either face-to-face, over the phone, or sending a text message. And indeed, Tajik men are increasingly divorcing their wives via SMS because they're in Russia with no intention of returning home. So although in divorce, in Islamic law, women do have rights to property and child support, Tajik women are usually living with their in-laws because that's the custom. You get married and you move to your husband's family's home. And when these wives are rejected by the husbands, the in-laws are no longer interested in having these women and their children. Maybe they were never interested in having this daughter-in-law in the first place. So there's really no rights for her to pursue. And because these men, again, are away in Russia, even if there was a local religious leader who wanted to hold the man accountable for this act, there's no way to do so because he is far away. According to Amnesty International, a report published in 2009, under Tajik law, so federal national Tajik law, women are entitled to 50% of a couple's property upon divorce. However, another problem is that many of these men and women only married in front of an imam in a Muslim religious ceremony called a nikah. And so these marriages were never registered to the state. In most cases, these couples don't even know that they have to go register at the court or the local government office or anything like that. So because they're not registered, these laws are actually not binding, they're not legal. So even if these women are aware of the fact that they can sue for rights, they might not even know that their marriages have no recognition under the state law. And there's really nothing to do. There's absolutely no consequence for the men. So they abandon their wives without consequence, and there are many legal experts who are constantly looking into the situation. They say, well, of course, a good thing to do would be to enter an agreement with the government of Russia to hold these men accountable, to take money from their wages, but no concrete action has brought this to be. So the ongoing mass migration of men to Russia from Tajikistan has created a serious gender imbalance problem in the country. There are simply not enough men. And this problem didn't just start in the last decade or so. It goes as far back to 1991 when 100,000 Tajik men were killed in the civil war that eventually led to the country's independence. Fast forward to today, although polygamy is illegal in Tajikistan, many women without men become second or third wives, entering into marriages by religious ceremony, again, that are not recognized by the state and thus offer no protection. So in the short term, these women might see this as a good option for financial stability, a way to provide for their children, but if something goes awry in this marriage or they're not happy with it, they're still with nothing. So the likelihood of dissatisfaction is, with marriage in Tajikistan is very high, and I will say this because for women with men, according to Amnesty International, again, referencing the report published in 2009, violence against women, and especially the family, is widespread, with 1/3 to 1/2 of the women having been regularly subjected to physical, psychological, or sexual violence at the hands of their husbands or in-laws. Andrea Strasser-Kamani, who also in 2009 was the Amnesty expert on Tajikistan, said that the traditional Tajik family values reinforced after the breakup of the Soviet Union imposed further discrimination on women by narrowing their identity to that of wife and mother, or pushing them into the lowest paid sector of the job market. In March 2013, after years of campaigning by local and international women's rights groups, Tajikistan enacted a domestic violence law. However, there has been no efforts at enforcing this law. Nothing's been done to implement it. So it's nice that it's on the books, but again, if you don't know that you have access to these rights and there's no way to enforce them, then it's just as well may not be there in the short term. In the long term, I hope that things will move forward. So the shortage of men and the violence of men against women in Tajikistan has also led to a robust online market for Tajik women. A quick Google search when I was doing a little research for this evening of women in Tajikistan listed a fair amount of sites offering profiles of Tajik women interested in dating and marriage. They identify themselves as single, never married, divorced, and widowed, but it's also safe to deduce that some of these sites are featuring women who are being trafficked as well. Of course, the consequences of this situation aren't only felt by women in the country. According to reports by Human Rights Watch, children of these broken families are negatively impacted as well, evidenced by high rates of dropping out of school at an early age because they need to work to help support the family. Psychosocially, girls become withdrawn and depressed, and boys, in the absence of a father, exhibit high levels of aggression. So with all of this information, it is even more impressive and incredible to learn of Nigora's story, a woman without a man who had the strength and conviction to go against the grain, despite the risk to her personal honor, as she mentioned, and that of her family. But in doing so, she sets a positive example for her daughter Aziza and her sons Rustam and Shukrob, that women are capable of anything they set their mind to, although society would dictate and enforce the opposite. She also sets an example to the women of her country, that a woman can be independent and do what she can to provide for her family, but of course at a very high price. Suffering, sadness, never-ending hard work, and the shame and embarrassment that her husband left her. But at the end of the day, sadly, in either scenario, she would be without a man and she would suffer. But I take a little bit of comfort in knowing that at least I see that she's taking her life into her own hands, and she has the hope that keeps her going of creating a better future and a different reality for her children. And I think also, when I was watching the film, something that was also heartbreaking to me is that it's such a triumph what she's accomplished, really, when you think about what so many other women in Tajikistan are going through, but she's not celebrated. There is no celebration of her accomplishments in her community. In fact, she's constantly being reminded that she's a man when she's in public now, or she's trying to be a woman and she's all these different roles. That's really heartbreaking to me, but again, she has this amazing spirit that she's really doing this for her children and for their future, and I have great admiration for that woman, and I'm very happy that we're all able to watch her story. And that line when she says this is going to be shown in America, I think it's very special that we're an audience sitting in America and we're watching her story and hopefully being moved by it as well. So let's move on to Bangladesh. Brandon Girls was made in 2010, but it's very much still representative of the reality of the garment industry there today. According to The Guardian, today it is a booming industry. So in the film, Bijoyata, the director, she said it's 3 million workers. Today it's 3.5 million people who are employed in this dangerous and low-paid work environment. And also the GDP, from 10% of the country's GDP, it's increased to 12% of the GDP. Fortunately, somehow, after she made the film and it had won a grant to make it possible to win, and it won some film festivals, not our film festival, but other ones in Asia, somehow the Bangladeshi Women's Film Society decided to give her an award of recognition for everything that she had accomplished for the rights of children, for the rights of women, and these little tokens of appreciation keep her going. And I take also, again, like great part in those things. So she suffers out loud in her many emails to me, venting her frustration and fear, but she marches on nevertheless, and like Nigora, the impact Shahida is making in her country has the potential to far outlive her years on this earth, only if her story and others like hers and Nigora's are told. And so that's our job as the, we can't really change any of the things that we see on the screen. I mean, we can sign petitions, we can call our Congress people and our senators, we can sign up for anything that we possibly can to try to help, but the point of these stories are to be heard and to be witnessed. And the people making them take such great, they receive inspiration, they're able to keep going and moving these mountains that they're moving and continuing to defy what society is expecting them, and specifically tonight, these women without men. Because they're living in societies, again, where men play a very important part in women's mobility, but when men are not able or not willing to do their part of the work, then the whole society breaks down. So those are my very, I think, down comments, but I hope that there's something good in all of it that we can take, and I would be happy to take questions, comments, your observations on the film, if you have questions about the work of Women's Voices Now.
In middle and upper classes, are there people that, for instance, are there any women in government?
In Bangladesh?
Yeah.
For example, yes, the Prime Minister is actually a woman, of all things. And that's a good question, because certainly the opportunities available to women definitely vary based on social class, socioeconomic class. But I think it's still important to mention that even the most educated women in these societies may still be victims of violence in the home or within the family. Just like everywhere else. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But there are people that have money that can try and help there.
It doesn't seem, from Shahida, when I'm asking her questions like that about what is the Bangladesh government's role in lifting up civil society and helping, no, they're not doing much, and it's very underreported, sad situation, and really, we actually can do a lot from the outside if our government is giving money to Bangladesh to be aware of where it's going to and ask for accountability on those sorts of things. And there are some NGOs that are allowed to be there, and they are doing good work, but it's within a very fine perimeter. But they can't really upset anyone in the government, or else they won't be welcome there anymore.
I have a question. Firstly, thank you for bringing such films to all of us, and saying that you will carry this message forward to others as well. What is your selection process in terms of how do you select these films from all over the world? Do you approach them? Do you connect with the independent local filmmakers from all over the world, or do they reach out to you? So what's the process?
Our process is very 21st century. It's called Facebook, Twitter, word of mouth, and email blasts.
Okay.
And people are very willing and able to spread the word, and that's a very beautiful thing. There are very lovely film communities. There are a lot of people who have the ability to tell stories now, obviously with the access to handheld smartphones and other things like that. Since Women's Voices Now was established in 2010, the explosion of film festivals that are focusing on human rights issues as well as women's rights organizations, and just basic advocacy, giving people voices, and so that they can amplify their own voice, giving them the power to have a voice, to know that their voice matters, and then giving them tools to amplify those voices. I mean, people really come together for this, which is very positive, I think, even though there's a lot of bad news out there. Thank you, Rupa. Yes.
So, I forget the names of the companies that, like, the Gap, I think they said, in Bangladesh. So, is there, do those companies care? Is there any oversight? Like, they must use third parties to manufacture. Do you know anything about that process and how involved, like, the Gap is and who they hire to do this? And
Yes, so I think, like with most, from what I know, only from what I know, like with most American companies abroad that are like sweatshops and things like this, I just think it's like a don't ask, don't tell policy, and it's very upsetting when something like a fire that causes a building to collapse happens. I don't think that the corporate social responsibility actions in these places is very high at all, as you can see, because not much has changed. I mean, there's still this sort of abuse 5 years later, after 6 years later after this film has been made. Not much has changed, and I think that, unfortunately, a lot of us buy our clothing at these places, and our dollars speak much louder than our concerns.
So should we stop buying clothes here?
Well, that's a very, I mean, everyone needs to do what they want to do. I think, yes, in theory, if the 300 million Americans that there are weren't buying from Old Navy every time there was an incredible sale. And with economic times being hard, how can you tell someone not to like provide for their children with affordable clothing? So that's a tough thing to strike, I think.
And then if they didn't have the garment places to work.
Where would they have to work?
Yeah.
Exactly. So what Shahida tries to do, for example, which is something I've experienced and seen personally in Nepal, where you try to build the villages instead of this like the false hope and promise of going to the capital city where there's all this industry for jobs. You try to make the youth especially be appreciative of where they come from. So you focus on the agriculture, you put water systems in, some sort of sewage system, so that there is something that like there's a community that they're proud of being a part of, so that they're not leaving the villages anymore. So I know she's trying to do that, but it's not happening at a massive enough scale, and of course then that would sort of upset our whole global economy. So I don't know how that would turn out, but that would be the idea, is that people not leaving their villages anymore for false promises. Someone else had a hand, you had your hand up, right? No?
I will ask.
You said Old Navy, and that's part of the Gap.
Right, so Gap, Old Navy, Banana
And
Republic,
Banana Republic.
yes, the
And
conglomerate.
they really do that? They give them such bad wages?
I mean, I don't know too much about this, but I remember as a college student, even a decade and a half ago, that Gap was even chopping down forests in the Bay Area, and no one was really getting too upset about that. So if we don't even get too upset about it when it's home, it's really hard to get upset about this when it's thousands of miles away, and people who we don't really know or feel connected to. Yes, Rupa?
With Venice Arts and with the last couple of screenings that I've seen, and Women's Voices now, are the screenings focused on documentaries, issues, human rights issues, or are you open to narratives as well in the future? What's the immediate vision for Venice Arts and Women's Voices now?
So the wonderful partnership that we've entered into this year with Venice Arts, we are focusing on documentaries primarily, but Women's Voices
And
now.
that is because Venice Arts is focused on documentaries. So Heidi had some amazing narrative films when we started talking about what the collaboration would look like. There was some incredible narrative storytelling happening as well, but because the focus of our gallery and public programs, our exhibitions and screenings is on documentary, that was the reason for that focus for this screening series.
Yes, but within our catalog of works, we have narrative, student, experimental, and documentary. And the whole idea behind Women's Voices now as well is that all of our films, our written material, everything is free and online. The idea is we we want to break down the barriers that there are to film and movie going, that kind of thing, that film remains to be sort of an elite affair and something that only certain people have access to. And when we have these stories on our website and they're available to anyone who has an internet connection, the idea is that the power of these films, what's the word, it's exponentially bigger. So that's what we try to do. And in our, we're currently collecting films for our next film festival, and we've actually expanded from just shorts to include features. So we're looking for feature narrative films and feature documentary films. So we're very excited about the content that we'll be hoping to add to our collection in the next couple months. So actually, I wanted to ask a question of you guys. So we watched two films, one Bangladesh and one Tajikistan. It's presenting women without men, okay, and how we are perceiving these women, and in a lot of ways they're victims, but these are women who have taken their victimhood and they're trying to kind of switch the table on themselves. In our American society, where I think when women are without men, they are celebrated. I think women here are celebrated. It is an accomplishment to be able to do things on your own, whether you have a partner or not have a partner. There's upward ways of mobility, but I think there are still barriers when women are without men. And I wanted to know if any of either of these films struck a chord or made you think of things in your own circles and societies that made you kind of reflect on the relationship of men and women to women and men to men when someone is not represented by the other, if that makes sense. I had it written down, I'd love to get home.
Well, my
Yes.
observation is, when I look through the program, your focus is international. So then to your question, stories of women struggling here in our own country, which are, yes, very positive, but there's also lots of outcomes that aren't that positive. So maybe how do you think about that? How did you choose to focus internationally? Maybe you didn't, that's just how it happened.
I'm glad you asked this question. Until January of this year, our mission was to specifically focus on women in Muslim majority societies. And we just expanded that to include all women's stories and individuals who identify as women. So again, in this next film festival that we have, it's going to be a much wider range of voices, the stories that you're saying we need to hear and be told. And we made this decision because we have been watching the way the women's rights struggle and discourse has been evolving, and what we're doing is sort of contributing to marginalization if we're just focusing on one kind of woman. Yes, women from certain parts of the world or certain societies and communities. So we've opened it up because we need to have this cross-dialogue so that we can identify these commonalities and then really truly come together and move forward to the solutions that are beneficial for everyone.
Yes. I was wondering if there was an opportunity for the subjects of the film and their families to view themselves on film, and then also if there had been any recordings of like the Western audience reaction. I was familiar with this woman who did a lot of work in Africa, and where in certain Muslim societies also where the working woman is kind of ostracized and a pariah, and seeing the reactions of other women from different parts of the world where the same social stigma didn't exist was very uplifting in return. And I was just wondering if any of these programs, give that lady a chance to see all the Western women that support her and are not ashamed of her and are proud, to call her a sister.
We specifically haven't done anything like that, but again, we're still a relatively young organization, and one of the things we hope to have enough funding to do eventually is to do creative workshops for women, and to do exactly that, where there'd be sister programs, so let's say somewhere in Uruguay and somewhere in Egypt, and they'd each be making short films about the same topic, and then they would get to watch each other's films and have a dialogue about that. We're working toward that, because clearly that would be something invaluable and really special to be a part of and to witness. And yes, Elisa.
I just wanted to say in response to your question, venicearts also does some international work, which I didn't mention in my intro at the beginning, so I would be up there talking forever before the screening. And we'll be screening a couple of our films later in the year, and one of the things that we did with those films, we worked with an NGO that works with sustainable forestry and human rights development in Southeast Asia. So we worked with community members to actually make those films, and then went back, the NGO went back and showed those films in those communities so that people were participants both in the making of their own stories as well as viewing it in community. And it was really powerful. And I sadly did not get to go, but it was wonderful to see the photos of these small communities and everyone sitting on the floor and a sheet tacked on the wall and everyone seeing the power of that story and people's faces after the screening of the power of seeing your own story on screen.
Yes.
I was thinking about the question that you posed to us and kind of what chord did it strike in me. And I was thinking just about the privilege of being a woman with a partner and children in the United States, and what I think the difference is. Well, there's a bajillion differences, but I think that having a partner allows you to obviously share the child care needs, which then allows a woman to explore kind of herself in a way that when looking at these stories, these women are doing everything for their children, which I think is really beautiful. I mean, their life is just, I just want to make my children not to have to suffer the same way that I did, and that sort of sacrifice. And so just thinking about the role of a mother here when you do have a partner versus the role of a mother when you don't have a partner, and how that really just allows you to be a little bit selfish and kind of having your own wants and desires.
But then to ultimately be a better parent to the children too, right? If you're if you're satisfied with your life as much as possible as well.
Sure, and it's just interesting because when you, look at the husband who went to Russia and just left the kids, there's not that same sort of responsibility.
Yes.
What I thought of was, here I've seen women in lots of traditional roles. I've had mentors who were first to do in their law firm or whatever, but I have yet to see a woman mechanic or a woman working at Just Tires, or it was ironic that that's what she does now. And yet, I don't know, has anybody seen a woman mechanic here in Los Angeles?
Only the Gilmore Girls.
What?
The show The Gilmore Girls, from a long time ago, there was a female mechanic in that rural Connecticut town, but not in real life.
There are there's women astronauts here, there's women, knock down every door.
Everything is possible on TV.
Yes.
I was driving here yesterday and drove past some road work, and there was this big sign that said "Men Working," and it was just, that's what the sign said, and that's what was happening, and there was no movement to make that sign say anything else, or to have that be a more diverse field of work. So.
Yes, Elizabeth.
I just wanted to thank you. It's incredibly humbling to see these shorts. And it's incredibly humbling, but it's also infinitely inspiring of the human spirit. And then the impact you're asking is really, it makes me think about how can my work and my time and my resources be of service in a more deep and profound way. Because we live a very privileged life. So I just thank you in that impact.
Thanks. Thank you for being here. I think about this stuff all the time, of course, and these are really big issues and they can't be solved. I don't know ever if they'll ever be solved, but I'm going to still work toward the day that maybe they are solved. But I think what's a really special time right now is that people are very aware of the status of women. It's 21 years almost since the Beijing declaration that if the status of women improve, then the entire world will improve. But something really important to me that a lot of the women's rights, women advocacy groups don't focus on is there's a lot of focus on political quotas, getting women into office, giving women professional economic opportunities. The women have to prove their worth by making money and by being in public office. These are very valuable things. Of course, we have to do those things. Obviously, if women are half the population, they should ideally be half representative in these important positions of power. But if a woman can't even see herself in those positions, she can't even imagine herself going out to get work, or she can't imagine herself having the right to stand up to an abusive partner, then how are we ever supposed to make anything better if inside of ourselves, men or women, we don't believe that women have these full human rights to be respected? So when we watch these films, because this language of film is so universal, the tears, the smiles, the stories, we are moved, I think, at least I am, to understand that there also has to be a shift of heart that takes place, that people psychologically have to really, take in, they have to really digest and understand that there is a problem with inequality of women, that it is something that's at the cultural level, it's inside of us for thousands of years for whatever reasons, and we have to work from the inside out. It's not just about the outside in, and if we're moving in all these directions toward the same goal, then we can get there faster, but it can't be done unless we literally change hearts and minds. And I think that's the power of these films, is that they do work that way, because they do play on our emotions when the lights are down, and it's just us facing these subjects, these brave people who allow their stories to be told, and the filmmakers who are telling these stories. So I'm very happy to hear that it inspires you to think how you can be of service. And I don't think there's any too small way to be of service. It's even when you look at the people around you and you think about, how do I treat men and women in my community, in the way I interact with them at the coffee shop or at work or on the telephone, or any sorts of human interactions we have, that very easily we forget about the human being inside of there. And really every action we have and every word we say can affect the greater good, or work for the greater bad even. So I'm just really pleased to hear that that's the effect of the films, and I think that's how it starts, from the inside out.
And I was wondering if there was any way to write to the woman who says, this will be shown in America, to say.
I can put you in touch with the filmmaker, gladly.
I saw it, and it was, it was.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put you in touch with the filmmaker. I don't know that she's still in touch with her, but I'm very curious to find out. That's a good idea. I like that a lot. We should do that.
Can I ask a question about the Tajik woman? So I forget her name?
Nigora.
Nigora. So the filmmaker was not a Tajik.
No.
Right. So, and she didn't speak Tajik.
No, she
didn't speak Russian either, really.
Mm-hmm. No.
No. So, but she was moved to go to Tajikistan and shoot this documentary. Well, that's fascinating. I mean, she had this in mind, or was she a person who? I mean, this is off subject. It's about the filmmaker.
No, it's great.
But was she interested in Tajikistan or women or Tajik women, or was? I'm curious how you end up making a film if you don't speak the language and you're not from there.
Another question I would have to ask her specifically. I know she received a grant specifically to do this story,
Wow.
But I don't know how she came to come to know Nigora specifically, because yes, I agree, it's very random. Yes, so I'll
Really
go back to her.
terrific subject, and Gora was so compelling and appealing and gorgeous and tough.
Yeah, and I've seen
Jumping
this
up on
4
that tire.
times now. 4 times I've seen this documentary. Every single time I notice something different about the way the story is told and the things that she says, and it's a very powerful story. It's definitely one of our best films that we have. Yeah. Yes.
So my question would have to revolve around coming from a background of a social impact awareness campaign development standpoint. You have this captive audience, the lights did go down, we're all moved, the lights have come up. You know, what is like one thing we all have that we can do walking away from this, whether it's in relation to tonight's selection of films or next month's or the months after, that is directly in relation to these stories or the people in them, something that we have a chance to take action on. I think it's not enough just to see it be moved in our heart and soul, but what next?
What next? So, from the Women's Voices Now standpoint, what we ask our audiences who have the time and who take the time to watch these films in a curated environment is we ask that you take those films to your friends and family, that you organize your own screenings, and we help you curate a screening package, no cost, that might be interesting to your community of friends and family. And that's our main goal, is to get these films viewed and hopefully get them to the women eventually, and men who wouldn't necessarily have the chance to see them, which is what we're always working on, is how to expand our reach online, because that's basically the best way we can do it with limited resources. Like as someone who is constantly trying to do social justice work, I would like to think that it's always for us as individuals to decide how we're going to make an impact, but I think it's about, if there's an issue or a story that means a lot to you, and there are organizations that support the women and men in those situations, and you can support them, whether it's with your time as a volunteer, with financial resources. Organizations do a lot with very little, so I would say do your research to find somewhere that would best benefit from your skills, services, and other resources, and stick with it, I think. Yes.
I think it'd be very effective if we get the executives of the companies that are using these people to make it real for them.
I agree. That's
So,
also an excellent idea. I'll have to look into see see if that's been done at all, because yes, that those people should be seeing these films. They should be going there, really. They should go work in the factory for a day and see what that feels like.
No, that's not happening.
Right, right. It would be good if they did. Yes.
I think, first off, what you said about working and living in the business world, and I was wondering when you made the comment that we do this for approval. That's your comment, but it's, I think, a good question to ask ourselves. Whose approval do we need and why? Because I see this as there's something missing here in women. And I wonder where that stems from and what is it going to take for us to be whole and within ourselves. That not dissing men, and obviously they're equal, we're not any less, and we're certainly not more superior. And each one of us has talents and abilities, but I don't really think it's meant for a comparison. It's not a beauty pageant, physically or in any other way to me. So if there's a vacuum or a void that women have had, which you said for thousands of years now, with oppression, and I think it's a silent suffering that we've endured for a very long time. And maybe parts of ourselves allowed it, and at the same time, you know, I've heard stories of women that have been abused and have been blamed for the abuse. This is unacceptable. There was a Facebook page of a teenage girl with her face beat up, and she was told, well, if he's mean to you, he must like you. And I was like, because I remember hearing that as a little girl. If the little boy's pulling your pigtails, that must mean he likes you. This is, I'm sorry, but this is backwards. That means you're, basically, to me, it's self-inflicted abuse, where you're going to take responsibility for someone else's anger or hatred, and not only be the victim of it, but then blame yourself for it. Why? So there's a void here, I think, and I can only speak for myself, but I've been around here for a long time. I see things, I hear things. It baffles me that we're sitting here in Venice right now in the United States, and we have to sit here and watch what's going on in another country because we don't deal with what's going on at home, period.
Hopefully this is a way for us to be able to deal with it. But sometimes when you see it in another person, then you recognize it in yourself and you can start
So
talking
what's
about it.
missing? So what?
Someone behind you wants to maybe answer and comment.
A lot of people raised questions about what can be done, and it's a really great book. I would recommend if people are concerned about women's rights and trafficking, that was written by 2 Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists that basically proposed economic solutions instead of playing on morality, which never works with depressed classes, and basically proposing that the solution for the future. And when you look at development studies and you see how you get people out of poverty, it's always involving women, so that women will be the solution. So I think the book is called Half the Sky, and it touches on everything from how you get a girl out of trafficking to microloans, which have been tremendously successful in South Asia. But it's a great place to start, and I also think it's great that we're all here. No one willingly gives up power. If women want these rights, we're going to have to take them, and we're going to have to support our sisters here and around the world when they take courageous acts for progress.
Absolutely, I agree with everything you said, and I would like to also mention that when I look at the statistics of views of the materials of Women's Voices now, whether it's our Facebook or Twitter or our views of our website, the majority of people coming to our website are actually male. And I find that really, I want to believe that that's a very good thing. That a lot of the support that we get and a lot of the positive feedback are from men in Afghanistan, men in Pakistan, in India. It seems those are the 3 countries where we get the most feedback from, that they're just so grateful for the work that we're doing. They're so glad to be able to have the opportunity to watch these films. That's very promising to me as well. Women's Voices now was founded by a man, and it was his utmost belief that in order to make everyone better, that women have to be better treated throughout the world. But I always mention him because, women cannot do this without men. And if women have a void, then so do men as well. Because to have to treat people like that, to treat a woman like that, for rape to be the #1 weapon of war today, this is a sign that men are hurting as well. And I don't want to, get enough thing where we hear enough about men. We need to hear about men too, because obviously there's a reason that they're behaving the way that they're behaving as well. So there does have to be a dialogue between men and women about why violence occurs and where it's coming from. And again, it's in our own backyards, and we have to talk about it in our communities and also be aware of it abroad as well. And again, to find strength in the commonalities, even if they're not the best of positive things, but still to know that these are human problems and there must be human solutions to them as well. It's not impossible for us to do these things.